Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Rachel and Dana. This is a podcast where two book coaches, editors, and besties discuss books not as readers but as writers to draw inspiration from great books and have plenty of laughs along the way. Literally before this recording started, I'm always doing weird stuff on camera right before the recording goes. It's really good. So this is our, so we're going to be talking our editor's takes for Twisted Love by Ana Huang. It's very late in the day. You can see I'm in my vampire lair. That's how you know it's it's late. So my brain's starting to fragment. So we are talking about our editor's takes for Twisted Love by Ana Huang. And before we do that, this is our last book pick for 2025, which is crazy. So Dana, do you want to tell the people what we've got coming up for December, and then we'll talk about what our first book of 2026 is?
Well, yes. Well, first of all, thank you for reminding me of what I'm supposed to be talking about. Y'all listen, it has been a long week, okay? So
it's only Tuesday.
You know what it is, and I need you not to remind me of that, okay?
Frightening. Frightening. 4 more days left of this thing. Oh my god.
Oh my gosh, you're so wrong for that. So this is our final pick, and so for the month of December, we are kind of like, we didn't want to have like a full-blown season ending type of vibe, but at the same time not jump into our new reading list for the new year. So what we're going to start doing is have some shorter episodes that we're going to have some best of conversations across the picks that we've had this year. And listen, y'all, like Rachel might map this out. Dana be flying by the seat of my pants most days, okay? Now, I'm not saying I'm not a planner, but for stuff that I don't have to, I don't. But I think it's going to be so
interesting. Here anyway.
Girl, please, you could do it for both of us. Just tag me in. I think it's going to be so interesting to have our best of conversations because we can look back at all of the picks that we've had. We can also do some comparisons. And I think it's going to be some great episodes for people who maybe have not been with us the entire year, about some you may want to go back to. And we've sort of found ourselves doing it inadvertently in some of the most recent episodes, comparing previous reads, and I'm looking forward to that. So that for those, I do think I need to prepare a little bit more than normal. But thinking through our picks, and so we're gonna have some shorter episodes, so they won't be probably, y'all. I'm not making no guarantees. We don't intend for them to be long at the same length.
Supposed to be long, but
I'm going to keep it, look, I'm going to keep it a buck, okay? We want them to be shorter because it is also a time for us, both of us in our businesses, that we do have our downtime, and just being able to model that is something that you need in your business and in your writing career to refresh, refuel, pour in all that you've experienced. Even though we have already started our selections for 2026, which Rachel's going to tell us about. So I'm saying that, but on the other hand, it's low-key like it's giving, we are keeping the party going.
I do think that, because the thing is like we'll have episodes for every week in December. So really, for the listener, the party doesn't stop.
Yeah, it doesn't.
We'll roll right through December with some good, like, best of episodes. And then hit them in January. Can I tell the
Come
people?
on.
Yes.
It's your pick.
So for January, my pick to kick off 2026 is going to be Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This book is, it's really cool because this is, this was Brandon Sanderson's like big breakout novel. So he had published one book before, Elantris, and that got him into the industry, but it was really Mistborn was the one that took his career. That's where it feels like Brandon Sanderson became Brandon Sanderson, and really established his reputation for storytelling, for hard magic systems. I feel like that's your quintessential Brandon book. And of course, his later works, you can see the way he's grown as a writer as he has continued writing books, which is really cool when you have someone who's as skilled and as prolific as Brandon Sanderson. To see the ongoing development, as a writer, is real. I think it's both awesome and extraordinarily encouraging for all of us who are out here not being Brandon Sanderson. And, you know, to see that, like, even Brandon Sanderson is growing as a writer, is getting better, is trying new things. It gives you that permission to say, I'm going to write where I am, knowing that, like, I have more books in me than just this one, and I'm going to get better with each one. So Mistborn is just one of my all-time favorites, and I teach off of this book constantly. Like, it is my go-to teaching, like, example for the 4-act structure especially. It's very tightly plotted. It's very well organized as a story, and honestly, we're not going to have even half of the amount of time that we're going to need to really dig into this book, but I'm really, really excited to start January strong. For whatever reason, it's like January, I'm like, let me hit you with my biggest, meatiest pick, and I just give you like just a left hook. We started with Ninth House in 2025. 2026, we're starting with Mistborn. Let's go. So I'm telling you now, because it's like 530 pages, so you might want to pick it up like today and start reading so that you're ready for our conversation come January.
Listen, y'all, her excitement goes up several notches. So just know that
this is what you're going to get all of January. It's just going to be me being like, oh my God, guys.
We're going to get gamer Rachel.
With fewer swears, just for
yes, please.
The listeners' benefit.
It's all good. You know what? I'll take you either way. It's all good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, as always, I like to know that we aim that most of our selections do have audiobooks. So there is an audiobook. And y'all know, now listen.
Good too.
No, this one is a good one. Y'all know this is a Rachel pick, so y'all know how your girl, you know, usually a little bit low key on the struggle bus, but it's okay, because I'm cool with Mistborn. It took me a minute, but I am cool with Mistborn. So I'm looking forward to it because I haven't read it in a couple of years.
Yeah.
So that's going to be good, and I'm looking forward to it. So I'll be starting it soon as I finish the book I'm reading now, so that I'm ready for the thumper, the door stopper.
Buckle up, baby. Look, I don't even have you on Way of Kings, okay? This is like, Mistborn is like starter Brandon Sanderson. Way of Kings, where I think the audiobook clocks in at like 38 or 40 hours. It is
Get the heck out.
It is. You get into the book and you're like, I don't understand what's happening. I'm very confused. You get into it and you're like, what is going on? And then he delivers. He continues to deliver throughout that story. This is literally, so this book, Brandon Sanderson generally tells his own readership, if you've never read something of mine before, I don't necessarily recommend you start with Way of Kings, because Way of Kings is huge, and I want you to trust me as a storyteller before you try to go into my 1,000-page books, so that you, when you're in there and when you're like, where is this going? You know that you can trust me and see it through to the payoff I'm going to deliver to you at the end. And he does, and he delivers every single time. We just recently finished Wind and Truth, which was his most recent release. Audiobook was, I think it was like 60 hours. It was like, it was some kind of, and you know, Trevor and I are listening to it together, so we only listened to it a little bit at night, and it took us months to get through because I also fall asleep really fast. That's not the book's fault. It's a problem of physical makeup where I'm just like, poof, gone. But we got through it, and he just delivers. He just delivers. So yes, anyway, that's I don't even remember how I got off on the tangent. I'm just excited.
Listen, I'm just here. The thing that listen, I have no words. The first thing that comes to my mind is like the commitment as a reader, and then I think about the commitment as a writer to writing it. But then the ultimate thing that comes to my mind is like how much fun it must be to fully explore. Yeah, because you talk about character growth and the journey, and just really being able to just to be able to marinate in it. And I just bet one day when I grow up, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be a goer. I'm gonna do it. I don't know if I can do 1,000 words. I think I would be tired of my own self after 1,000 words, because that's a trilogy, right?
No, it's 5 books.
5 books, and they're all that long?
They get progressively longer. So, like, the first one, right, is, like I said, is like maybe a 38-hour audiobook. Second one's like 45 hours. Third one, yeah.
He's saying, I don't want you to have a life.
Books or is it 4?
Listen,
hang on.
he said, I don't want you to have a life. Your life should be Brandon Sanderson. That's what it should be.
A little bit, yeah. Like we're all just living, breathing Brandon Sanderson, and then we have to wait out for Era because the Era 2, right? He does a single series, and then he does the next era in that world, right? So it's like 100 or more years later. That's what he did for Mistborn. So like a few hundred years later, it's amazing. It's so good. But now we're all waiting on the second era of this world of Roshar, and we're all just, we know it's gonna take like 10 years or something. Like we have to wait forever, and we're all dying for it. So no, we have no life aside from Brandon Sanderson has become all.
Can you imagine the pressure of just, oh my gosh. But I guess, but if he already has a system, I was talking about that in our inner circle today, of like, when you start having this, it's sort of like having a system of how you think about your stories, right? Mm-hmm. And he knows like, okay, here, I know I'm going to deliver these 3 books or these 5 books, and then I know I'm going to have, 100 or 200 years later, your mind is already calculating probably, I know for me, before you even start book 1, but I mean, the pressure of it. But man, I was so mad when I didn't get in his Kickstarter thing, and I found out about it too late, because I was like, I totally would have done that. I'm not like you, like a diehard, but I would have loved to just be there as it rolled out.
Yeah.
To be able to experience it. But yeah. That's awesome. So all of this to say, over the next month and couple of months, we're going to have our best ofs for 2025. This is a great time also for you to let us know any recommendations that you have, because at this point we still haven't fully rounded out our list, and we can always have stuff that we're thinking about for future reads, and also preparing for, stepping our toe in when it comes to Mistborn and Brandon Sanderson. So I guess we should be thankful that it's only 600 pages.
Yes. Honestly, that's we got in on the low end. Wow. Starter novel. Let's go.
That's insane. Oh my gosh. And to think like how far in advance he has to have it done to be able to get the audiobook and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Takes a lot of time. Oh my gosh. And just, this is another plug for the Mistborn audiobook. Michael Kramer. Oh, he does it. So Stormlight Archive he does with Michael Kramer and Kate Redding. And Kate Redding is also amazing. But Michael Kramer does all of the Mistborn books. And he's just a phenomenal narrator. I would listen to him talk about anything and read any book. It does not matter. I would listen. So 10 out of 10, highly recommend Mistborn as a book, and the audiobook is just fantastic.
And I will say, especially if you're a person where you're just like, okay, fantasy is not my thing, I hope that our track record over this year helps you to see that you can learn a lot from everything that we've selected. I think listen, I'm biased, but I think we've done a great job of our book selections.
I agree. But I think we've done just fabulous. I mean, just objective observer here, but I think we've done quite well.
But that you can learn a lot. I think from having something that is a big, like a massive body of work, you really can look at things like character development and their growth and the progression of the plot, and really talk about elements that have a lot to do with the fact that this is a book 1 and things like that we can discuss. So don't let that part, that may be even an even better reason to do it, you know, to be able to get that audiobook and kind of dive in and then join us on the journey as we continue our reads.
Absolutely.
For 2026.
Woo, 2026. It's coming. Ooh, it's hurtling toward us. So everybody buckle up and get ready. Put your hands up and scream if you want to go faster.
You know what? No, I don't want to go faster.
It's like, no.
It's gone fast enough, ma'am.
All right, before I derail us further or set this roller coaster on an even scarier trajectory, let's dive into Twisted Love by Ana Huang. So, Dana, before we dive into our editor's takes, will you hit the people with the summary?
I will. Okay.
Just really bludgeon them with it.
Okay, right. You know what I'm saying? So, Twisted Love is a steamy, emotionally charged, contemporary dark romance about two opposites bound by family, secrets, and obsession. When Ava Chen's protective older brother leaves town, he asks his best friend and cold calculating neighbor, Alice Volkov, to keep an eye on her. What begins as reluctant guardianship turns into an intense, forbidden attraction that forces both to confront old wounds. Alex hides a past scarred by loss and revenge. Ava carries buried trauma of her own. Their relationship becomes a collision of control and compassion, guilt and desire, light and darkness. It's a story about what happens when love cracks open the armor you've spent a lifetime building. A mix of grumpy sunshine, brother's best friend, and good girl, bad boy tropes reimagined for a modern audience, blending emotional heat with psychological depth.
Awesome, awesome. So, before we dive into the details, what are some of those high level things you want to hit when we talk about our takeaways today?
Well, what had happened was, I, it's like what had happened was, I think the biggest, y'all, there's so many things. It's sort of like what we talked about Rachel and Miss Bourne that I could talk about with this book. So it makes it kind of hard. So my brain just goes skirt. And so part of what we want to talk about is I want to talk a little bit about the balance that we found when you think about the story balancing across it when it comes to the balance of like that climactic fallout versus that HEA at the end. And I'm sort of starting at the end, but I think it's one of the one of those distinguishing parts of the story of how you find that the after the reconciliation, if you will, that we kind of have a longer, quite a few chapters that are longer than what you normally find. And I think it was a wise decision. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. Also, we wanted to talk a little bit about something that we mentioned across the previous episodes, which is the selection of POV moments. And we did talk about this. I believe a lot, but actually in characters, like we've talked about it in every episode pretty much, but I think it plays a lot in how we digest and take in our experience with Alex and also how we see the both of them come to this place. And it really lends itself well to how especially when we get to that, the climactic point and their kind of fallout. And so the POV moments, and with that, I'm only going to piggyback just a little bit of the fact that I think she did a great job of like making the decisions about what makes it to the page and what doesn't. And I sort of hinted at Rachel that there was a couple of things that I thought were misses and that it sort of centers on that a little bit for me. And so we can talk about that, which is like making those decisions as a writer and in your story. And I think, in the end, I think it was some things that could have been done maybe a little bit different, but I don't think I would change it. I'm not saying that. Like, I wouldn't change it, but it is something that I noticed. And the final thing that I think, and I'm sure we'll probably come up with a couple of things, but one is I really believe, and I need to look at when this book was released, but this is one of those books that I just know it was written with marketing in mind. And this is something that I just teach. I think it just helps so much when you're an independent author. I think it helps so much if you're a person that you're a slow writer, writing with your marketing in mind. And so the tropes that she chose, the fact that it was kind of trauma led a little bit. I think a lot of those things, I just felt like she had TikTok in mind. And the fact that she's blown up on it and gone viral so many times is not surprising to me with this book. And so I think it's a very interesting thought about that I love exploring, of like looking at the components and elements of your book and not looking at writing to market as being a bad thing, even though I'm not saying just writing to market, but thinking about how that intersects with your brand and the story that you want your readers to expect from you as a writer. And I think the final thing, I think the final thing for me is really paying attention to the fact that this is both sort of this balance between contemporary romance, dark romance, a little bit of suspense. And even though in romance, I don't think if you were a romance writer, you would consider this as blending genres. But if you look at the components that it makes up, it technically is, if you think about the subgenres.
Yeah.
And so I think she did a really great job of sort of having the feel and sort of maintaining the feel of us being in a romance, but having those dark elements be enough where it wasn't like some of our previous where it felt like mafia light or a little bit, lightish,
Yeah.
We were in it, but I think she did a great job of like still keeping it very much romance. And then still giving us access to those highs and lows that come with being and having a dark romance, and then sort of like tacking on that suspense slash like thriller that kind of came around, and it was brief, but it was enough to sort of shake it up, and then for her to sort of lend us and then ground us back in the romance. I just felt like it was a great mixture that makes it so that it is a read that can be read in all of those genres, and you could still enjoy it as long as you're okay with the fact that the steamy scenes are steamy, but overall I think it doesn't overshadow the story. And so what are some things that you had that you wanted us to consider as well?
Yeah, so actually, this is really just kind of like fitting right in with your sort of like comment on the subplots. I just want to reiterate from the plot episode the way that she nested her plots, right? The way that she opened and closed gave us setups that prepared us for what we were going to experience, but also gave them to us at the right time, right? The way that she paces it so that we're closing in on Alex's goal, and that's bringing us closer to that suspense, and then that wraps up in that loop sort of closes or finishes before our romance loop, because that's our primary loop. So that's the last thing that we really want to see resolved, and she struck that balance really nicely, I think, in the story. And then the other one I want to highlight is developing characters around a similar problem. And again, back in the characters episode, we talked about this with Lucy Score, that she did it really well as well. And Ana Huang did it really well, like in a different way, right? We got Grumpy Sunshine with both, but the types of things they're dealing with, the way that they deal with those things, those are all different. But she does it in such a way that it really unifies our characters and their journeys, and also makes them right for each other. And so I just kind of want to highlight that as a really effective way to develop your characters in a way that makes them unique, but that also allows them to kind of like learn from each other and share like a thematic, you almost create something thematic among your characters by kind of showing these different positions in the world and in the way that they handle problems and how they deal with a similar subset of problems. So those are my two big ones from this novel.
I'd love to sort of start on that last one first. I find as someone that is an avid romance reader and a romance writer and editor that is common in romance, but it's only going to be common and beneficial for your story if you do it with intent.
Yeah.
Right. And so part of this, it's helpful with with our brains as the reader buying the story that you're telling us.
Yeah.
Right. And us beginning to cheer and root for these opposites who are total opposites, right, in between Alex and Ava, when it comes to on the page. But for the things that have sort of grounded and rooted their lives, they are the same, right? They are the same. Now, how they chose to process it and make meaning of it is different.
Yeah.
And so that is so helpful. And I think, listen, there are always things I'd love to ask her, like, are you a plotter? How much? Like all this stuff, because I just always want to know, like, did you think of this early, right? But having the opportunity to let that unfold and then begin to layer that so that it'll pack even bigger punch as we move forward. But them having, at first those opposites, but then those commonalities that sort of build a bridge, if you will, between them. I think it is so great, and I think it's a great version of looking at these particular tropes in a story where it's so clear about their opposites. Because again, in romance, they're almost always opposites. They're hardly ever, not opposites. But in this sort of a story, you do see that trope so prevalent because it is such an extreme.
Yeah.
Where there is in any common or any way, stretch of imagination, you wouldn't put these two people together. But here, they work out beautifully in time. And that's the thing that we want, right? In time, as the story evolves. So I think that's really, really great. And then I think the other part, too, of continuing to bring back the sort of those themes and those elements of the trauma, the childhood wounds that are needing to be healed, and how they are aiming to address it with like their childhood hurt with their adult brains.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those things that it's like, it's bound to get a little bit kind of out of whack, which is why when we talk about control and the rest of the plotting, that she used the fact that even he was turned on his head, because it still wasn't. And they both are in that dual growth and transformation, that he still had a ways to go, and she did as well, which turned out to be a really great and entertaining story.
Yeah, well, and I think about, I was trying to find this specific page, and I couldn't find it quickly enough, but John Truby talks about this. Now, he talks about, this is in the Anatomy of Story, and he's talking more broadly, right, across genres, but talking about, the way that you sort of frame your characters in the story as like revolving around kind of a single type of problem, where the story is exploring a problem set, and different people are navigating that same, and again, it's a problem set, so what it looks like varies from individual to individual, but there's sort of like a through line between all of the different problems that the different characters are facing. And what it does is it allows your characters to have this kind of consistent thread across them all, but be wholly unique, and also be believable, right? Because of course, like human experience, the way we experience and interpret things, and then what we choose to do with those interpretations varies wildly across people. We don't right, it's not ubiquitous that everybody experiences the same thing and then everybody deals with it in the same way. That's not how people work. And so when you kind of apply that principle to your characters, it allows you to give them uniqueness and nuance. Well, also, I think it's nice because it gives you sort of this guiding principle to follow that is, if you're looking at, if you're looking at like an epic fantasy that has, multicast, for example, you're not sort of sitting there thinking like, okay, what kind of wound should my character have? And then you're just sort of like picking, and when you're just sort of like trying to develop characters, and you're trying to give them a thing and trying to like kind of just cobble all that together, and you're just pulling stuff in and trying to make it work. Now, I want to use that also to springboard, because you've talked about romance and how the backstory and the wound function in the story. So in romance, it has to be more intentional, and realistically in other genres it does too. But if you don't know that, sometimes you're just reaching for stuff, right? You're like, I just gotta give him a backstory, and so you kind of like look back and you're like, you get this one and you get that one, and then we'll try to put them together. But using this principle allows you to find something unifying, so that you can kind of focus it on like, what is this story exploring? What problem is being posed by the plot that is inviting the characters to be someone different, and to be or to not be someone different, but to grow into that better version of themselves. And then that's where you really can start to layer in those themes, not in a way where you're having to tell the reader what your story is about, but they're watching it play out on the page, because they're seeing all of these different people who have all of these different experiences navigate those, and navigate them through the requirements put upon them by the plot that says, nope, now's the time that we're going to deal with this, so buckle up, because you're going to have like this, there's only one way forward, and it's through, and requiring them to confront those things, and then bumping into each other along the way, and you create a more cohesive story, and it creates that more cohesive whole. So one of the things that you talked about in sort of like the pre-show is how in romance, like by design, like it has to be that way. Like it's sort of like required up front. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the wound and the backstory function in a romance as well, just to kind of give the people a little more to chew on with that.
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say, The first thing I want to say is I like that too. I didn't remember that part, and I need to go back. I haven't read that book. I don't even want to put time on it. Okay, probably older than you. Okay, but the way that I like looking at that is that you have this sort of one sort of theme or thought that you're sort of like have able to. Now, listen, if you are listening to the audio, you can't see my hands, but just know.
Maybe check out the YouTube. I don't know.
Come on.
Just a thought. Get those hand gestures.
Just for the gestures. But you sort of have this one concept that you are sort of exploring, and you begin to be able to look at it from multiple different angles. And those different angles are made up by your cast, and sometimes it's by the cast that you use to create your series around, or that will come up in future books. You may find that it becomes a grounding point for your series. But I totally agree, and I think what it makes it too also feels complete, and it feels well-rounded. Right. But when it comes to when you're working with romance, you'll find that a lot of times the wound is a direct connection to the transformation that they need to have in this story. Right. So it may be a wound with abandonment or infidelity, or that that basically it happened before and they've built this barrier between them and the world and these walls. And this is the story that's going to demolish those walls. Right. And so understanding so therefore that wound then is connected to the backstory of what caused that. And then it also comes with it. I think it was, I think I really started exploring this when I went to a talk years and years and years ago, maybe 15 or so years ago, by Michael Haig. And because I was so limited again on my emotional words or whatever, I started looking for, when I'm reading stories of like, what is it about that, the connection between that wound and that backstory? And the way that I teach it is that they had that moment, and because they had that moment, they created this truth that they live by. That is a lie. And that's the part that I learned from Michael Haig, of like, they've sort of have this lie that they've built their world around. And to me, then there must be occurrences in their past that have turned that lie into a truth.
Yeah. Because
they affirmed
reinforcing that idea.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's what you see a lot in romance, whether it's said that way or not. But it makes it, I think it's a grounding way to think about it if you're still trying to wrap your head around it. And it's not a natural way that you write, but it does make it so that it's a little bit easier to have that transformation begin to unfold, because you begin to understand what are the lies that you have to dismantle for the truth, the true truth. I don't know if that's a real word. The real truth, the real deal, whatever, to come to the surface. And what's happening in romance is that this relationship is challenging whatever reasoning that they had for never going there again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But because I want you, and because I like the version of me that I am with you.
Yeah.
Right? Until they freak out, that leads to the all is lost. And this is inevitable, right? It's like you ask about too much too soon and I can't do no more, right? And so I think one of the things that we see here is that she does such a great job of laying this out, because we see it on the page as they're addressing it and as they're bringing up those bits and pieces of Alex's story. And even though we don't know 100% what he's doing, it's starting to break down those elements, right? Because we're taking what was in the past and we're bringing it forward, because that becomes the motivating factor for how he's operating and what he's using to make his decisions, whether wrong or right. Right. But it's a part of his I don't want to say DNA because he's changing it, but it's a part of it's a part of his ethos at this point.
Yeah.
Until he meets someone who's he can see has been through something equally as traumatic, and she's chosen to do something different, and he no longer sees that as a weakness or naivete with her, but he sees it as a strength.
Yeah.
And that is part of the change that we see in Alex. And it's not something, I think having conversations like this is what helps us to see what we see.
Yeah.
Right? Like we notice what we notice, we put words to it so that when we're looking at our stories, we think, well, did we go through the process of breaking down those things that reinforced that lie, that turned that lie into truth?
Yeah.
Or are we just saying, oh, I love you, the sex was the bomb, and so now I'm healed? Like,
yeah, just a good lay was all it took. Woo, that was easy.
You know what I'm saying? 30 years out the window, whatever. Right? And this is where I think sometimes people get romance a little bit misconstrued, but I think there are some stories that are like that. But if you're listening to this and you're here, that's not you. And since it's not you, let's go ahead and equip you with the real deal. Okay? So that's what you're looking for, and that's what makes it so that even in the furniture moving moments, that it's all a part of, because the reality is you have characters that must go from lust to love. The physical intimacy of it, and in that intimacy breaks down a barrier that is hard to get to any other way, because it's very hard to have any sort of ego or whatever when you are in your most vulnerable state. I don't care who you are. And again, we're exploring that here in Romans. And so when you think about bringing this all together, the wounds, and you look at the fact of how she brought the two of them together and how they had similar wounds, but that how the circumstances of their lives called them to handle it in a very different way, and their method of coping with it or handling it or dealing with it is what sort of collided here. Mm-hmm. Right? It's sort of like how he helped her and how eventually she helps him. And so that meant all of those pieces that felt like bring this piece up and bring that piece up you realize that no, it wasn't this random, oh, that looks interesting, let's pick that one. And instead it becomes inevitable. Mm-hmm. Inevitable. And I will say this is probably one of those things that could be explored, the fact that we're talking about things in the story that are very deep and very heavy, and you just don't get over it because someone does you wrong and there is some sort of justice by the justice system that it sort of handles things, that it just erases all of those years. And that's the part I think that kind of gets skirted over because this is a story. But I think in a lot of ways, the way that it was handled in totality. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a great kind of jumping off point, right, to talk about the climax and the climactic moment and the fallout and what it takes to get that happily ever after. So you want to talk a little bit about how Twisted Love sort of achieved this and what it did and how it sort of managed that?
I don't know if I can say all that, but what I will say, first of all, this is the climactic moment for the cause. Okay, I don't have anywhere else to say it. I feel like if you ever wanted to get one that will tear out your heart, pounce on it, throw it against the wall, catch it, run around with, like, all the things, this is the story. But I think what it does is in this moment, it delivers on everything. Mm-hmm. It delivers on the romance. It delivers on the dark romance. It delivers on the suspense. It helps to clue us in on all those little crumbs that we have been gathering the entire story. The gaps in the story that, not gaps for Alex or for Ava, but just the gaps that we were still trying to string together, almost as if it was a crime story, but not. And it comes to the page and it comes in this huge explosive package. And here's what I think is great about this story. This is when it's done right. Mm-hmm. When you let all those things collide in one scene, and it's just, You can't stop reading. You want to stop. Your chest is hurting. You can't breathe. I can't believe he did, but actually I can. Like, you're having a whole, like, life decisions. They look different.
Yeah.
Because of moments like this. But it really was bringing it all together and allowing it to collide. And then what it begins to do is to allow them to question and test, who am I for real? Who am I now? Because after this, for the most part, except for the romance, right? Because it still had some ways to go, all the cards are on the table.
Yeah.
Now, what she did here that we love is the fact that she made this colossal climactic moment. She allowed that thing to breathe.
Yeah.
And really let the consequences of that moment be aired out, and it wasn't just an easy fix. And I think that's another part of building really great characters and letting that story breathe. Every story needs something different, and this is what this story needed.
Yeah.
And so she let that happily ever after, because that's a requirement in Dana's book if you're writing a romance, right? We know you can have a happy for now, but in a love story, you can have a cautionary tale, right? Where they don't walk off into the sunset together. We just get to experience their love for what it was. But in this case, it is a romance, and therefore they are guaranteed this happily ever after. But at this climax, how, Sway? We want to know how. And this is how you hook us. And I think this is why people love this story so much. Yeah. And it probably could even be polarizing. And if it's not polarizing, then it probably isn't as good as what we think. So I think that just makes it even better. So when you take that climax with the happily ever after, it was equally as weighted. And she let it breathe. And we were able to watch them process it. And it makes me think about, I think it's been a little bit of a soapbox. And I think I said it in another episode, and I promise not to carry you too long. Y'all know I'm known for a squirrel moment, and I'm going to bring it back. But this is why I absolutely believe that no romance should be without a breakup. Mm-hmm. You need the breakup. You need the breakup because we need to see that they are able to digest this thing, and they're able to address those wounds, address those lies that they had made as truths, and decide, who am I now? Yeah. Who do I want to be going forward? And they need that moment so that they are not tainted by or distracted by love. Now, the love interest is never far from their thoughts. Mm-hmm. Because if it's done right, they're the real one and they want to get back there, but they need to have that moment to ensure that their sort of healing, if you will, is complete without that. But they need the healing to be who they need to be to get that person. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So again, this is why I'm so glad that you saw this. This is why I love this story, because I feel like it's one of those ones that there's no way you can miss that. It's very clear and evident, and it is very helpful if you're a person where you wrestle with that. It's a great story to be able to see it on the page and allow you to have discourse around, okay, what am I seeing? Notice what I notice. Capture those details. What does that look like in my genre? What does that look like for my readers and in one of my sort of stories? You know, you're not going to wreck, tap dance, pour salt on it, throw the heart out the window, go pick it up. Maybe that's not your type of story. But it may be like, what does it look like in my world, to ensure that they go there and they truly get that transformation. And then when they come back, they are still themselves, but they're a different version of themselves. Yeah. And for better or worse, right? We want it to be better, but some of them, they're still equally as ruthless depending on the story. And so that's my little bit of a soapbox. So to bring it back here, she didn't just allow us to have this big boom, bang, pow moment and it fizzled out. We still had a journey to go. Yeah. And I think it was the most almost like quiet, healing, allowed to like have tears, have moments of, you did this to us. Yeah. That happens in relationships. And I know, but I'm here. Yeah. So that they can get to the other side and have the openness and the being accepting of wholehearted love, and while knowing everything that there is, and there are no more secrets.
Yeah.
Right? Well,
Yeah.
as much as Alex is capable, because he's probably always going to have some secrets, but
Yes. Yes, yeah, and that climax, sorry, not the climax, but really that kind of final act of the story was so nice, because it also, like, to your point, and I don't remember if you said this on call or off call, but, one of the things that you said is, like, love is not the solution. Love
right.
is what you get to on the other side of the healing. Like, you heal and you're capable of giving and receiving that love fully. And we really see that here, because Ava doesn't, like, get with Alex and she's like, now I'm brave, right? Like, I'm gonna go pursue my dreams. That's not what happens.
Right.
Alex helps her begin to become braver, particularly about her phobia, right? He helps her with that, but then she has to take that journey and finish it on her own, and we watch her do that. And then the same thing is, like, we have to kind of watch Alex walk out what happens when I get the thing that I've been planning for all this time, and everything that it's cost me, and sit with that cost and make a determination of, is it worth it? Like, is it worth it to continue the way that I've been going, or is it better to have a life with this person that I care about? And giving us, and again, it's funny because I keep seeing the comparisons to the things we never got over, because we saw the same thing with Knox, right? Where it's one of my favorite sort of like post breakup like sequences of all time, because he just has to sit in it. Like,
yes.
He was such a jerk and he's so grumpy, but he knows that it's his fault, and he just like sits and he stews in it until he's like, and he has to fight that fight with himself. And we see something similar here in this kind of final act of Twisted Love.
Well,
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, because I wanted to catch you before you transition, because I want to say one more thing about that, but finish.
No, I was about to transition. You caught me. So say one more thing before, because it leads really nicely into one of the other things you wanted to talk about, but finish your thought by all means.
Okay, so the thought, and I think that's a great example. One of the differences that I loved about Naomi and things we never got over, listen, if you're new here, it was one of our earlier book selections, so go ahead. After this, you can go back.
Get in there.
Right.
Yes.
Is the fact that Naomi, he thought he was going to be able to still keep her. Yeah. And be who he was. And she was like, oh, no, bruh. Yeah. Not on my watch. And that's what I loved about Naomi.
Arc, right? Like,
listen.
This was her. And so, like, he was on the other side of her growth. And he was like, what? Hey, you
exactly.
Damn it. Like, it's so good.
And so I'm glad you brought it up, because it was pre-call. What I like to just remind students of is that love is not the answer. It's the catalyst, right? You don't want love to be the answer. The love is not the solution to their healing. Now, what I love is when love is the reason why they're willing to go through all of that, because I want you in my life, and I can't stay this way and have you. Why? Because she's not going for it. And I want her. And so it becomes the catalyst of, like, having those tough conversations, having those tough moments. And for Alex, it was like sitting in it and having to almost to separate himself from his norm to be able to be there for her and show her, I'm not going anywhere. And I think one of the things that we didn't discuss, and then we can move forward, is the fact that there was a lot of affirming of this relationship that happened earlier in the story that you don't always have at that point in a relationship, in a story, that I think was so crucial to us accepting the disruption of that breakup.
Yeah.
Right? The scale of it. That there were already a lot of affirming moments that showed that he was in it. And this is what made it harder for Ava, right? Yeah. But it was there, and I think it helped with the flip side. But I think that this is one of those times where creatively, like, you really want to make sure that there is a sense of balance. If you really are going to take people there to this pit, you want to make sure that they have high enough highs that it makes sense to us as a reader to keep rooting for them. And so looking at the sort of balance of that is so important. And so, yeah, but take it away, Rachel, before I find something else.
So this kind of leads into one of our next points, or one of your points that you wanted to hit, of kind of something that didn't fully land for you in the way that the ending was done. Because we just talked about how good it was to let it breathe the way that she did, but there was a little bit of like, and we left the people on the hook in the last episode of like, oh, what is she gonna say not to do? I got on the edge of my seat. So do you just want to talk a little bit about, because the letting it breathe was really successful, and it was really like, it was the right choice. There was just a little bit of the execution that you were maybe a little bit not sure on.
Yeah, I think sometimes whenever you have a story, not sometimes, I mean, I think you'll see it a lot, is that when you have a few number of chapters and you need to cover a distance of time, that what happens is you have to pick and choose what makes it onto the page and what are the things that you tell. And some of the things that were told, I would have preferred to have on the page so that we could have had some of those moments where the healing was then, like evidence of the healing were on the page versus it being a retelling. Then it just sort of being done almost like a montage, right? Montage works a little bit better in a movie. It doesn't work as well when you're talking about in the written word, right? And especially if you're talking about an audiobook. And so I would have preferred that if we would have stepped back and figured out where some of those key moments were, that could have been almost a mirror, if you will, to some of those earlier moments, that they would have been full scenes. Because then we would have been able to be on the same page in our mind as the reader, that this person has changed, because we would have seen for our own eyes, right? If you will. And so that is one of the things. However, because we needed the time and we were already in the fourth act, I just think it is what it is. But I believe that knowing that piece of information as a writer can help you to decide, well, which ones am I choosing? I know where I'm going. And I know where I want this thing to land. What are some of those scenes that's going to help me get the most from this moment? And so that was the thing that I had about that last act, even though overall I feel like it was greatly done.
And it's just one of those things where, like, you, just to your point, like, you kind of have to weigh, like, the pros and cons and then make a call and say, okay, I've got to cover this amount of time. Now, how do I cover that? Like, but I'm in the fourth act, so what do I do? Like, because the people know that that they're going to get back together, so you can bring them along for a certain amount, but you can't pull them along forever, right? And so you don't want that to drag, because then it's like, it almost, if we followed Ava, and I'm not saying this is what you're suggesting, just, in theory, if we followed Ava in, like, this is her new life in London, and here's what, it would almost feel like we were in an act one all over, right? Like, if we showed everything, it would almost feel like Groundhog Day and we're back in act one, except in a different place, like, in a new, and so that's where, that can be where you kind of have to figure out that trade-off of, like, okay, what do I sort of, like, truncate, and what goes into sort of telling, because we're always telling and showing both. It's just a matter of when and where we do each of those two for the pacing of the story. And so where do I kind of truncate, and where do I kind of, like, show it sort of in real time? And again, to your point, it would be a matter of, like, oh, maybe we just, some of those things that got truncated, we elongate them a little bit so that we can see for ourselves the way that Alex is changing and the way that Ava is, engaging him differently. And like you said, giving us that evidence on the scene versus the summary that says, look how different he is, kind of thing. So that makes sense.
It and this sort of smashes or consolidates what I had on my list on those other two things, which is being really mindful of, like, what makes it onto the page and what doesn't. And that's, I think it's such a strategic decision that it's, yes, it is storytelling, but it's also, like, what's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. Right? That's the way I really see it. Like, you can write a bunch of things to so get you to the end, but what's going to do the most good, especially against what you've done so far. So there was that. And there was also the selection of the POV moments to be able to be a support of that. And she just did that really well. And so I think that all comes down to it. I think those are some huge craft decisions. And I think a lot of times you see clients all the time that they are just stuck in a cadence and they don't realize that you could probably do a lot for this moment if you just switched POV.
Yeah.
And so here I think it's again one of those stories where we see some of those moments where, man, that selection, it just amplified something that was already going to be a very challenging scene, but picking the right POV it just meant that, girl, you are coming for our throats, and we are we paid you to do it. You know what I'm saying? We paid you to do this to us. So that kind of folds those in, and so that's how I think we look at both that climactic moment, the HEA, the decision of how do those scenes unfold without causing it to lag and to negatively affect the pacing.
Yeah.
And also giving each one of them that dual transformation, and which we talked about in our character episode. And all of this comes together to really be some great storytelling. Great storytelling.
Yeah, and the thing I would say too about that, and because it's helpful, and I remind like my writers and my students of this like all the time. When we're reading a book, we're reading a finished draft, right? It's been through revisions, like it is a finished product. So your first draft is not going to look like this because it's somebody else's final draft that's been through revisions or had beta readers or all of the above, right? And so when you're looking at choices like that, particularly with where you're kind of budgeting your showing and telling, and even when you're looking at where is the optimal POV, those decisions start to verge into revision. So like as in you're writing your draft and you're taking your best kind of guess while you're writing it, like, okay, I think this is the POV to do it, right? So you write and you write and you write and you're making your POV choices as you're going. And even when you're plotting, you may say like, oh yeah, this is this person's POV, and you just sort of like you do it with the plan that you have, the best that you know at the time. But then it's like in revision that you might start to make like that it might be worth looking at some of those key scenes and saying, what happens to the scene if it's from someone else's POV? And I'm talking main characters mostly. So if you're in a multicast third person limited, or if you're in a dual protagonist romance, something like that, not just like taking a scene and being like, what if I introduce this character we've never seen before and tried their POV? These are the things you start to look at in revision of when you're refining and you're saying, ooh, what happens if I do it from this POV? Or if a scene feels like it's not landing and you are using multiple POVs in the scene, just like say like, well, what happens? Like, what is it from a different person's perspective, right? But again, those are, and same thing with your telling and showing balance. That's something you are figuring out when you are revising your scenes and you're saying, ooh, the pacing's a little funky here. And then you make those adjustments. When you're in your first draft, and even as you're going through your second draft, you're just kind of doing it the best that you know it. And then you're refining in the revision process. So I just wanted to highlight that because I was thinking, oh, this is a good time for people to remember that like we write in stages, and there are certain things that you are more likely to be tackling in those later revision stages, so that if you're writing your first draft, I'm talking to you, first draft writer out there, fussing over what POV a certain scene is in, now is not the time. Now is not the time for that. You just need to get stuff on the page. So do that thing, and you can fuss about POV later. So I thought it was worth mentioning, like, hey, this is where we worry about these things.
Yeah, and I will say with that, but I think the flip side of that coin is why it's so important to read and read wide, and why we're doing what we're doing here, because part of this is exposure. And then as you are exposed to it, you could begin to say, I like that.
Yeah.
So what am I looking at? And then beginning to sort of pick apart, and that's when you become the nerd of it all, right? And being able to see, it's almost like, I hate when people say this, but it's so true. Like how the sausages.
It's because you were vegan for a really long time. You're like, I don't want to see how the sausage is made.
I don't care about no daggone sausage, okay? So, and girl, I'm in Texas. So, um, and so, but so that you really can begin to explore and see, and it's almost like having this opportunity to say, like, what are my options? What are ways that I can explore this? Because some of those choices helped us to get a sense of meaning and heart and ache that we wouldn't fully have had exposure to had that choice not been made. And so I think it just, again, like, especially because this is the editor's take and we're on the tail ends, like, we can't say everything about it. We can only look at the high points that sort of rise, in our minds right now. But I think what we see when we pull back is that whether this is your jam or not, as far as the genre, I think you get so many opportunities to explore some craft elements of character development, pacing, theme, I would say romantic progression, the handling of trauma and things that may be considered triggers, and also doing it in a way that still feels, even for the subject matter, fairly light.
Yeah, still feels very much like,
romance.
Again, a contemporary romance.
Exactly. So she did a great job with that. And so sometimes what you'll do is you have to find something like this, maybe even find one that's a step further, and then find one that's a little bit lighter and begin to look at, like, what does the spectrum look like?
Yeah.
And I think this, like, as we said, is just a great pick to be able to do that with.
Awesome. Well, are there any other last points that you wanted to touch on before we pack up Twisted Love and wrap it up with a bow?
No, I would just say the reminder that it is steamy, that it does have very graphic sex scenes, but I would say I would still make a recommendation for it. And you may even find that it's not your jam. I think many people find that I like it, but you maybe still not say that it's your jam, but allow yourself to take the gems from it still, of the experience. And I think the other part is just like being committed to whatever it is that promises that you have for your readers. If you are aiming to have a romance that your characters are going to have to work for, and we feel like they are going to earn that happily ever after, then bring it, right? Bring it. And I think there's something to be said about an author that is like telling you what that promise of the story is, because we had some that it's been a little bit shaky for some of us than others. but to be able to set that promise out there and to deliver, it makes for having a reading experience that you will not forget, even if you never read the book again. And that's, I think, above, unless you're like, I'm going to write the next great American novel. I think that's what we really want, right? We may not have that it's every single book in your catalog, but it's going to be a book that just resonates with people. And they will always say, you remember that time? Do you remember Twisted Love? You're going to have those moments. And I think that's what we want as writers, right? To have our own little sort of stamp on something that we absolutely love that sticks with our readers well beyond the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Well, on that note, everybody go study your genres. Get aware, but also, right, it's, again, you're right. This is the whole project here of, like, it's important to read outside of, like, it's important to study in your genres, because if you're like, I'm going to sell crime novels, then you should probably know what people who buy crime novels are buying, or romance novels. And then we get into, our niches of, cozy mysteries and dark romance and, how did I lose every subgenre of every category ever?
And even when you're like, there are some that's why I love saying, like, okay, I'm on the struggle bus with this, but I still know how to take lessons, right? We still know how to get those wins from there. And that's what this is all about. It's not about being perfect, but I think sometimes because you're not so attuned to it, you can see stuff better. And that's the part that I think makes it even better. And it just, the more you have an appreciation for that, you can struggle bust your way through a book.
Yeah. And come out with insight. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's just like, again, it's like, it's good for the creative mind, and it's good to get that variety into, because now all of a sudden you're pulling from so many different things. Like, you have this whole catalog in your mind of like books in your genre, so you know what your readers are looking for, but then you have all of this experience beyond that you can like pull from to really innovate and to bring something new and to bring something fresh, and to keep those creative muscles moving, you know, and keep things in your mind. Like, it's like getting blood flow, right? Like, you go for walks, you go for runs to circulate blood in the body, and this is like that same creative exercise of like circulating imagination and innovation and good creative food for your creative practice. So that's your charge as we go into 2026, is to dive headlong into those books, and we have some great recommendations for you coming down the road. But first, we'll do a little bit of wrap up in December, which I'm so looking forward to. It's gonna be so fun. So with that said, that's gonna do it for Twisted Love by Ana Huang. And don't forget to like and subscribe, leave us a rating and review, leave us a comment, let us know what kind of books you'd like to see, what kinds of questions you have. Visit us at storydeepdive.com. And I think I already said this, but I'll say it again just in case, because it's super important. Subscribe so that you get every new episode coming straight into your inbox or your preferred podcasting method, podcast listening, whatever. It's fine. It's late. All right. That's it for Twisted Love. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We will look forward to seeing you next week as we start our December wrap up for 2025. But until then, happy writing.